All right, we are live on YouTube.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's May 6th, and we are here with some folks from ADS and the Vermont AI Council. We will go around the room and introduce ourselves, including our folks on the screen, and then we always ask our guests to introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for the record. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
Richard Bailey from Memorial 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington. Michael Southworth, Caledonia, 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Garrett Torrey, Washington 2.
Fred Plebner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Smiley, Wyndham 2.
Scott Campbell, representative from St. Johnsbury.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
John Kelly, Chief Staff, ADS.
I'm Justice Collin from Vermont Supreme Court and on the Vermont Supreme Court's Commission on AI use in the courts and the legal profession.
Super. All right, for the record.
For the record, I'm Mark Combs. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Agency of Digital Services, as well as the co-chair for the Vermont AI Council.
Great.
And I'm Josiah Ration, State's Chief Data and AI Officer.
Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
All right, over to you guys. Do you have, I know you shared some testimony. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want to just walk us through it?
We'll just walk through it because
Great.
I think it's really more to provide, opportunities for you guys to ask questions and, keep it in the hot seat verbally. So as I said, I'm the co-chair of the Vermont AI Council. We were formed in 2022, coming out of the legislative session, based upon some work that I had also been a member of the group for, which was a group which was studying the needs, opportunities, risks around AI and what the state could do to either aid, combat, or whatever, and how we would respond. So one of the recommendations of that task force was this creation of the AI Council, which provides sort of a more constant set of oversight for AI activities within the state, as well as become sort of a point for education and outreach within the state as well. So we have membership as defined in the statute from within the state from various folks, such as public service, civil services, the Attorney General's office. Then we have some outside council members as well who represent education and ACLU and other public interest groups. So that is the history of the council. And anything there you want me to touch on further? We'll go on to the next one.
I don't think so. We just had a review of some of this background with Ledge Council.
Oh,
So.
perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then wherever you see need for me to kind of speed ahead, just give me a wink or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I said, we were enacted through Act 132 in 2022. We oversee the state's use of AI to ensure ethical use, as well as provide public engagement on our use. Also within that was the requirements for us to meet once a month and provide an annual report, which includes recommendations that are taken from the various agendas and testimonies and such that we gather throughout the year, as well as working with my compadre here, who is Chief Data and AI Officer, who is actually more the operational day-to-day within AI within the state. So we intersect with him to look at the state's current inventory and report on some of the progress that the state is making internally. So that annual report, I think, is is the first part of this. So it's a second of I think it's our second annual report as a council was this year.
Third is the Code of Ethics was the first.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we had some recommendations within that, which I think are probably the source of most of your, questions with us. Through meeting for the last year, we had a lot of topics that we wanted to dig further on and, really get more meats into. As far as where we sit as a state, I'll say up front that thanks to the speed of execution and the abilities of Josiah and his team, I think Vermont sits out in front of a lot of other states, I'll be honest. we were one of the first to have a code of ethics for AI use within the state. We currently today have published guidelines for the use of AI, and these were all reviewed and voted on and as part of the council as well. So they were things that Josiah worked on and brought through the council and had that. Yes,
I do have a question about that. I didn't want to interrupt you. But,
you can, please.
so I'm curious about the code of ethics and the implementation guidelines in particular. How are those rolled out to state employees? That's a lot of folks, and I assume that it's more than just sending everybody an email saying "see attached." So how do you roll that out? How do you train people? How do you know that folks are taking it seriously and abiding by it?
Yeah, I'll let him jump in and give you the specifics, but I'll say that it has required a lot of dedication to internal outreach, lunch and learns, a lot of time spent with people, getting the information out there, really kind of almost to a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, so me and a few other folks on my team have held a series of trainings, probably 8 or 9 at this point, on AI related topics. And those have varied from like trainings for supervisors and managers, which focus more on the code of ethics and the ethical guidelines and ensuring compliance, to like stuff for employees, which is more like how do you use a tool like ChatGPT that I'll talk about in a little bit. How do you use that kind of tool effectively? And as part of that, go talk to your supervisor, because that's what we've said in our guidelines is you need to clear things with your supervisor. And I'm kind of constantly, usually several times a month, engaging with various units around the state that are like, we want to do this thing with AI. And then I have conversation with them and make sure that they're in alignment and come back to the AI council. If it's like, hey, here's a use case we haven't really thought about. How do you all think we should approach this? And I'll get their input on those things. But we kind of have tried to do a continuous set of trainings and then use the ADS oversight of procurements to make sure that we're making sure that tools and physical objects that have AI in them aren't getting procured without eyes on them to make sure they're compliant.
Representative Southwood?
Do you have modules through the LMS?
Not yet. We've done, we try to do it as like 1 hour, like a complete training. We've been talking about doing modules through the LMS, and when I bring on the new AI director, which will be any day, that's one of his first activities. We pulling us together.
What's the element?
Learning management system.
Learning management.
So states training.
It's an online training tools.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you've done any online training, you go and you click on a class. So we have one of those from the state, and we can upload numerous topics of coursework and such.
Okay. It's even done it.
Yeah.
If then required, you'll get an email saying you have this and you have so
Okay.
much time to complete it, that sort of thing.
Okay. Rep. Kleppner, was that your question?
Leave me to it.
Okay.
So the report itself, talked about the successes that we've had, but also really, to where we're looking ahead, right, where we're headed. AI is not a stagnant thing. It's not anything that anybody's got their hands around and said, this is what it is. It's changing, growing day by day. As we've sat here, it's morphed to something else. So that's one of the complexities that the council is facing at the moment. It's just that the group of people that we brought in to originally talk were, it's great, but there's so many new tentacles to AI that maybe, broadening the group so we can get some different roles and different, perspectives for some of these newer topics in there. There's been questions around, intellectual property rights and digital, image rights and things like that. And we talk about them, but I would say at a very high blush type level. And so we're interested in the potential to create subcommittees which are actionable, that include folks who are not necessarily committee members on these subcommittees, to investigate some of these, more in-depth topic areas. And then we're also, requesting essentially the broaden sort of the council's membership to include a few other perspectives.
I think one of the items we talked about was like when we first constituted the council, nobody really expected image generation and art was going to be like a really big deal. And it may not be a really big deal for forever, but for now, that's a topic that's on the minds of the art community in Vermont. And as it touches copyright, will be a deal for much longer. And so the opportunity to bring in some subject matter expertise in that space would be helpful as an example. Education is another big one. AI is really transforming how education works. And again, I think that wasn't necessarily something we expected right off the bat.
Include writing in that as well.
Yeah.
And then as I think the nature of your first question, around how do we get the word out, that public engagement's important too. So having different parties from different, backgrounds or different segments of the Vermont picture really helps with that public engagement as well.
Sorry, I can't remember. How's education represented on the council? I can't remember who the actual appointed representative is. Is it public ed?
We have
K through 12?
No, we have two folks who represent universities within the state. Dr. Sluisman, who's at Norwich, and he can, speak to issues within the education community as well as within the cyber community. And then Joe Neer, who he's in a UVM faculty as well as representing the ACLU at the moment.
So higher ed, but not.
Their primary thing, like that's nobody's primary
Right.
piece.
Okay.
We feel like we have some okay connective tissue at the higher ed level, but the K-12 that's another gap that we identified.
Yeah.
What page are you on?
I'm actually my apologies.
Slide.
Yeah, and
I'm still on the first page.
you are okay. So we're on the anticipating AI challenges. Page 5.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So, as we're talking about the future AI interests, so there are emerging technologies. I don't know if you want a definition of agentic AI, but it's essentially at a high level, it's the AI that's you're using to perform it's not like the chat GPT, which is a interactive, let me ask you a question, you give you a response. This is AI that's kind of acting with some degree of independence as an agent, as a worker, and doing things. So we're, monitoring developments in those areas because that degree of autonomy is different than what we've talked about in the past. If you're talking about the information you get back from ChatGPT, you're reading it, you're evaluating it, but now you're talking about with agentic AI, there's independent actions. Of course, there's supposedly learning and policy and everything else that guides those actions, but they're still independent actions.
Actually, on that one.
Yeah.
So as a for example, one of the trends that we're going to be talking about at the next AI council meeting is kind of consumer grade AI agents. So you may have seen videos of give it your grocery list and it goes to a site like Hannaford to go, puts it all in your cart and checks out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And like using AI agents to do that. So if it's shopping for your groceries, that's maybe low risk. I think one of the early videos, the person ended up with like 12 pounds of pasta, but that's not that bad. But if you do that to renew your driver's license,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, if the AI agent makes up an answer that is not accurate,
Right.
normally we call that fraud. If a person gives us inaccurate information, if they're kind of one level separated from the AI agent who's entering the information, does it count as fraud still? There's some things to think about as we're moving into this AI agent world and when it's appropriate to use as, say, an assistive technology and when it's not. So we don't have answers on that yet. That's what the next council meeting will be for, is to talk through that as one example of kind of those emerging tech challenges that we're addressing.
And then another leads into the area of cyber risk, which, at a very high level, it's really got to the point where it's agent or AI against AI out there, meaning that we're successful in protecting the state's network, for example, because we employ AI to counter attacks that are AI driven. And that's becoming more and more the case. And so as the AI is on one side, the bad side gets smarter, the AI is on the good side, they get smarter. And so we follow those a lot and we have, some degree of conversation about them, but we're not in the depth of those that we'd like to be at the moment. Um, Policy development. So, I know Dr. Stussman was invited here and wasn't able to attend, but, one of the things he wanted me to make sure that we put forward is that, he, along with, Norwich University, have a 4-hour training program, which is AI for policymakers. And they would love to re-engage with you and provide that as an opportunity. But we try to track various AI policies, or Josiah specifically spends a lot of time tracking what other states are doing in the policy areas of AI. Working with John Kelly over here, we track a lot of what's going on within our state house and try to stay ahead of the curve there so we can come in and provide good testimony that, gives you guys helpful answers. Thanks.
We were going back and forth with him. Do you know is that an online course or is that something we'd have to do in person? I think that's where the conversation bogged down.
I'm not sure. I can find out though. We will find out for you.
Or we can. It's.
Okay.
I think it might be sitting in my email somewhere. I might have written or intended to write and see whether that was something we could do in the waning days of the session here. Which would be great because we have time.
Apologize, I need to head back to the development, but
Thank you for coming.
no, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
We'll look forward to
Impressive.
seeing the judiciary report.
I'll have Terry send to the entire committee.
Super.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
That
you all
was,
very
it
much.
was
Thank you.
neat to see you here.
Yeah, I was glad to
Yeah.
be here. I had no idea.
Yeah, so as a crossover link there on our council is Justice Dooley, who's a retired state Supreme Court justice. He was part of the original task force as well, and he's on our council as well.
I do
Yeah.
consider your question. It's in person. It's a
It-
4-hour.
Is it, could they operate here or
They
do
can
we
do
go?
it wherever you want.
That'd be really cool. I think. Okay. Jack, make note.
So I'm going to move onward to the next slide, which is slide 6.
Can we go back to 4 before we move
Oh,
on?
please, yeah,
Sorry, I didn't realize I
that's
missed
okay.
page 4.
That was
So-
my fault.
Oh, that's okay. So I just wanted to go back to some of your key recommendations. I want to make sure that we're taking a minute to talk about that because that seems really important. So are these legislative recommendations things that you need us to do or things that you as a council want to do?
So we're recommending back to the legislature that support to allow the council to do some of the things. So one of these would be, cleaning up language maybe, or changing language to extend our AI oversight into more beyond state government areas, into private sector use in some areas. And
Right.
yeah,
We've got a little bit. So
Yeah.
we had a lot of discussion on the council about this because there are a few models that other states are pursuing. Colorado has a model that's currently being litigated, I think. California has stood up like a separate body basically to do AI regulation throughout their state. So there's a few models of what that could look like. And at this point, as we highlighted in the report, because the AI division is technically one position, we don't really have capacity to do like a sweeping regulatory body like California has put in place, right? Like that's not feasible. And that wouldn't even be feasible. Like if you said, go do it and here's 5 positions or whatever, like that would not be a thing we could do next year because it's like there's a lot to figure out between here and there. But it would be helpful to know from the committee's perspective, and we can talk about this at length, like what do you all envision the future as being? We put forward kind of an intermediary in that education role, our second bullet point there. We put forward kind of an intermediate phase where we could serve as a best practices clearinghouse for Vermont businesses as like, hey, this is what we use within state government. And like Mark and I are both regularly at events around the state where we're engaging with business owners on AI usage, or I recently did a panel on AI and mental health, talking with mental health practitioners about how to use AI well. So these are conversations that we're engaging in, but to start to take some of those best practices and centralize them and become a clearinghouse for that, we see as a good intermediate step of building our engagement, our ability to engage with Vermont businesses. And would position us to develop the relationships that we could then, if the future was some sort of regulatory body in, let's say last year was H7, 10, and 711. I don't remember what numbers it was from this session, but anyway, there were some bills establishing the AI Council as a maybe more regulatory entity. If that's the direction we're going, we would like to see that kind of phase over time so we can build those muscles. And it will require a lot of coordination with the Attorney General's office because obviously they have enforcement of consumer protections and things like that. So anyway, most of that section was we see a need potentially for some of this regulatory body in the future. We're not ready to say like, let's go do that yet. We think we don't need to be the first state to figure that part out. We'll let California and Colorado sort that out. But there's a step that we can take to kind of move us in a direction that would be of more service to Vermont businesses.
Okay. Oh, Rep Campbell.
Sure, thanks. Well, so it sounds like bullet point 2 is actually first. You would want to set up some sort of role as a clearinghouse of information that you could provide to the private sector ahead of any sort of consideration of regulation. That what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think the reason we ordered them this way was it would be helpful to know, like, do you see a regulatory body in the future? If so, then this education role is a good next step while we figure out what a regulatory body ought to look like. So they're like, but yes, functionally the work my team would do would be the other order. It would be great to have guidance from this body kind of in the order we've laid out here.
Do you have, I guess you're one person, but do you have any legislative language or, any sort of more specific or concrete proposals for legislation?
We don't have any specific proposals yet. We worked on that for quite a while in the council and we're like, the models are not mature enough for us to be like, here's what we think would work in Vermont yet. We really want to see where California's kind of consumer protection oriented language shakes out once it finishes through the litigation process. That may be a good model. We'll see.
Do you have a sense of a timeline for that? Is there anything that we should be thinking about for next year?
I expect we'll have more clarity on it next year. I don't know how long that litigation will take though.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Slightly different topic. I'm just curious what you see as the value proposition for using AI in state government to either get more efficient, reduce costs, produce better outputs. And we're talking a lot about the risk, which is appropriate. It's scary, but there are opportunities, I would assume, for.
And we're taking advantage of some of them today. So an example, like I was saying before, in the cyberspace, we have gotten ourselves up to a level of efficiency by using AI, without having to grow a workforce to 80 people, that kind of thing. There's other areas within the state. I think
if you jump up to slide 7,
yeah,
we actually covered a few of them.
okay, yeah.
Okay, so I can talk through a couple of these, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we've done a lot of AI pilots. I think one, I'll hit a couple of them that are pretty tangible. One was we had a research university reach out to public safety, wanting to have officer narratives about incidents involving certain types of drugs for a study that they were doing. And we wanted to support this study, but those officer narratives are full of like people's names and places, and like you can't just like give those away. So we did a pilot where we used AI to preliminarily redact that, and it still had to go through a person, but it went from being a thing that would take weeks to a thing that took like about 1 week for her to go through them, because the vanity plates, the AI couldn't find the vanity plates, so she had to go through and find those manually. But that was one example. Another one is the report that ADS puts out each year includes like a 1-pager for every project. And 2 years ago, I believe, I asked our ETMO director to try using at the time ChatGPT to do that report. Because what the feedback we had gotten was this report is really hard to understand. because you have to be like a nerd from IT land and also a policy wonk from whatever the policy area is in order to understand what this project is actually trying to deliver. And that was a 100-page report that year. And so I had high hopes that that was going to save a lot of time. And I asked her afterwards how much time it saved. And she said several hours. And I said, several hours? Are you serious? That's not very much time for a 100-page report. And she said, no, but this is the first year that quality has been what we really wanted. It's the first year that somebody could actually read this and like a normal human could read and understand what we were trying to accomplish with these IT projects. And that theme has come up many times where we'll go into something looking for efficiency and find that we've been doing more with less for so long that we kind of have, like, we're not doing things to the level of quality that we necessarily would like to be able to. And so using AI actually frees up our staff to zoom out from the mechanics of I'm typing the report to like making sure that they're in editing mode and they're explaining things well and it's clear and it can be understood. We run into that there. We run into that, like my team uses AI to do code reviews before we deploy things. And again, we didn't find it that much time savings. What we found is our code is now documented and we can actually maintain it.
And that aligns to sort of the AI enterprise maturity model. You know, generally where most enterprises are, including Vermont, is we're at that AI coworker type where essentially AI is being used as sort of a peer review to what you're normally doing so that the end product's better, or that, you know, you can create a perspective that's not normally yours, you know, those sorts of things. We're not at the point where agentic AI is happening so that you got one person doing the work of, you know, 80 people out there by pushing a couple buttons, but it is improving.
So we are seeing some efficiency gains. We're seeing more quality gains, which we now kind of expect first to get those quality gains. And then we'll start to see efficiency gains as we build more specific power tools for our users.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Rep Campbell?
Yeah, thanks. So do you know where AI is being used throughout state government? I guess I'm thinking of using it for, what I'm thinking of specifically, you go to a doctor's appointment, say, and they talk to you about whatever it is, and it turns out that they're using AI to write the notes because they're recording the discussion. Are we doing that in, I don't know where we would do that in state government, but are we doing that in state government? And do you know where it's being used?
So we put together an inventory. I believe there are around 30, maybe 34 use cases on it right now. And that's on the website and was included in the report, the ADS annual report. That particular use case we are piloting. We are going to be launching it kind of more broadly over the next few weeks. I don't have a specific date, but taking kind of the transcripts of the meetings that we have in the state that are okay to have a transcript for, the public record type transcript, being able to summarize those. There are some, specifically within government, some public records implications of using AI in that particular way that we're working with Visara on. And some states have said you just can't, but we think that there's a path to being able to take advantage of that type of tool within state government. So something we're working on. I think one other big one, ChatVT, I mentioned on this slide. We first rolled this out a little over a year ago, and we did another expansion of use cases of it yesterday, actually. And that's kind of an internally built version of a tool like ChatGPT. It uses a large language model that's deployed in our environment in the cloud. So all the data in it stays private to us. So state employees can use it with things that we could put into the cloud normally. So we don't put, very sensitive confidential information in it, but people can do things like drafting emails and work like that normally we wouldn't do in a ChatGPT or a public tool, because ChatGPT respects privacy and stays within our boundary. And we've got around 300 active weekly users before our expansion on Monday. So we're getting pretty good usage of that. That is States that have been doing ChatGPT enterprise pilots or Microsoft Copilot pilots are normally running around 200 users, like much bigger states than Vermont. So the fact that we have like 300 folks using it every week is pretty great. And so we have a lot of state employees who are taking advantage of it kind of for like those daily productivity tasks.
That's all internal to state government employees working with each other and all of that. How about
Yep.
as far as interactions with the public?
We have a couple of things. During the floods, we wanted to allow municipalities to purchase off of the state contracts for things like gravel and emergency construction services and things like that. And the challenge was that that data was being housed in a very old Access database, being turned into a 20-page tiny print PDF, and it was being updated incredibly fast by people who are very dedicated, but were making typos because of how fast they were going. And so we actually put an AI interface on top of that. It was our first public-facing production AI. I don't think anyone using it would have realized it was AI, but it would let you search for something and it would find the most relevant contracts for that, which meant you didn't have to use the right words. You didn't have to use the weird misspellings that might be in the document, and you could still find what you were looking for. So that was one public one. I don't think anyone would have been like, oh, there's AI, but there was AI underneath it to make it effective. And we're shortly going to be launching, and I don't have a date, I'm waiting for the new AI director to finish his background checks, but we'll shortly be launching public-facing chatbots. The approach we're taking is looking at publicly available data and data that could be publicly available, turning it into question and answer pairs using AI, letting state staff review those and confirm that they're correct, and then deploying those in a chatbot. So when you ask a question, it'll find the most relevant question we have an answer for, rather than the other way of doing chatbots is to like let the AI make up an answer based on your state websites. We think there's a lot of risk in our websites lying, so we're not taking that approach. Instead, we're kind of pre-loading it with questions and answers for like FAQs, and then letting people ask questions and find the most relevant answer that they may ask in another language. They may ask, like, use it. They don't know the magic words to ask to get the right answer. The AI will help them to find the right answers there. So
Would that be on like an agency by agency? Okay.
we're working with HR on a pilot. We're working with the marketing office on a pilot, and then also talking with human services about doing a pilot there as well.
It sounds like sort of a sophisticated search mechanism.
Yeah, and the goal is just to make sure that all the content is human curated. So we don't run into the situation where we have our state websites lying. That's what I'm looking for.
Or a 1997 document out there inadvertently, establishing the policy again.
Right.
Which we
Good
see.
idea.
Let's see. So that we jumped ahead because there was a question about, if we go back to slide 6. So, yeah, so I don't remember exactly what the question that led you to jump ahead, but we're only back to 6. Another thing that this council we see ourselves in is we've talked about, how these different areas of specific AI expertise are needed. With that, we're foreseeing, a little bit more of the bifurcation of our more generalized AI guidance and code of ethics to also kind of start to lean in those areas as well. So if we have the resources, we can create those subcommittees. We can, recommend more specific policy, more, realistic life-driven policy. Okay. So the questions that were asked of us ahead of time were just kind of like, there's the report and the council, and then you wanted to talk more specifically about the division within ABS and artificial intelligence.
Yep. Are we on page 8?
Yeah. So 7 is really kind of the where that part of it starts.
Okay.
And I've covered 7. I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can jump.
Okay. We can jump to 8. All right.
So at the beginning of of 24, we had the opportunity to, in ADS, to combine the data and AI, the data office and the AI division, and create a data and AI office. And the reason we did that was we saw that all of our AI pilots were starting to run up against data challenges, right? Like the data wasn't ready, the data couldn't be used for the thing we wanted to use it for like it was collected for one thing and then we were trying to use it another way, and we were just like running into data related issues. So we saw that opportunity to combine the offices, and I moved from being the AI director to being the chief data and AI officer, and then I've been recruiting a new AI director to come in. So but what that has let us do is have those AI conversations kind of all throughout our life cycle of projects. So as soon as we engage in a data conversation on an IT project, or somebody comes to us with a data related problem, we're able to have a conversation about, is AI part of the solution here? Is this part of how we resolve this issue? And also on all the teams within the data and AI office, we've been using them as pilots. So I've got folks who are using AI to stand up like data intake forms and things like that more efficiently. I've got folks doing code reviews, things like that. We kind of pilot it within the data and AI office, and then share the learnings with the rest of ADS. And like, this works really well. Just go ahead and plug this in, and it prevents us from having to kind of relearn or refigure things out with AI again and again. So I've included kind of this practice oriented, it's not really an org chart, but kind of the 5 components of the data and AI office. And this is all pretty new. We created our data practice back when ADS was formed, but it was really focused on serving human services, basically. So it was a pretty significant expansion last year when we started providing those services throughout the rest of the state from a more centralized location. We also have our privacy and governance practice, which we just created last year, and we have a director of data privacy who's engaged in these conversations to make sure that as we're plugging in AI and using these advanced technologies, that we're still preserving Vermonters' privacy and also the privacy of our state employees. So anyway, he's really great, and we're glad to have him on board. The AI practice is still the AI division of one position, currently vacant, but we'll have somebody in there shortly. We have a quality management practice that's really focused on how do we deliver solutions across ADS effectively and make sure we're not having to go back and redo work because we missed something, or things that tend to plague IT projects. And then finally, our constituent engagement, which is our public facing websites, both our apps and our like Vermont.gov websites. How do we engage with Vermonters in a consistent way as we think about all the lovely buildings we have here, right? Like, it used to be Vermonters came to these buildings to interact with us, and now they largely come to our websites to interact with us. So we're trying to treat them with the same level of rigor and thought to things like accessibility and the effectiveness of Vermonters' interactions online as we would have in these buildings. So that's how we're organized. Any questions on that?
Yeah, can I ask you, so practice is an unusual word here, at least in terms of government. It sounds, is it sort of an synonymous with service? Is that what we're?
Yeah.
Or is there a broader meaning?
Yeah, so we're kind of we're back of the house type of an organization. So yeah, they're the services we provide to the rest of state government. We've organized them into these kind of 5 areas that we've been calling practices.
Okay, but if I substituted the word service, that would be about the scope of what you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay. I just trying to understand. Thanks.
And then, oh, sorry, are there other questions on that?
I don't think so. Nope.
So on the next one, slide 9, I've talked about kind of the priorities that we're working on for this year. So this is all stuff that's in flight that we're doing now in each of these groups. I won't read them all. I'm really excited about the disaster response support that we're trying to build in as a core capability within our data group. We had a lot of people who were being heroic during the flooding events of the last few years, and really appreciate that, but would like to rely less on heroism and more on, we just know how to do this, and it's a standard part of how we do things. So we're calling it blue sky, so that, you know, even on days when it's not raining or whatever the bad thing is that's happening, we have the capabilities, and we're having those conversations with safety and human services and others that are preparing and doing readiness activities. Another big one under constituent engagement is accessibility. There's a pretty significant push from Department of Justice on improving accessibility of state services. We have until, I believe it's 2026 to achieve kind of a much higher level of compliance than was previously required. And so that's another big effort that my team is engaged in right now. And then on AI, I mentioned the AI power tool framework. That's how we're talking about AI within state government. We're not trying to, at this point, build kind of autonomous agents where there's like a human oversight over, you know, many robot minions. We think that that's not the way to deliver good outcomes for Vermonters. Instead, we're working on building power tools for our state employees to be more effective with how they with the work that they do. I like the power tool metaphor because it implies somebody who's reasonably well trained. Like most of the power tools, my 10-year-old does not have access to in the house, and she has a lot of oversight when she is using the cordless drill, which is the one that she's able to use. So a power tool implies a level of training. It implies specific tasks that we use it for, and the tool is used in particular ways to do that safely. So when we're building out, I guess, tools like our ChatBT and specific things within that, that's really the paradigm we're pushing people toward, is how do we give you a power tool that helps you think more about outcomes and less about mechanics, and meets these other criteria, and that keeps us from falling into some of the common AI pitfalls where there isn't adequate human oversight, or, you know, things like that happen. And I think that gets us to the end of the deck. So,
Rep Morrow
Yeah,
and Rep Campbell has his hand up too.
I have two questions. One is, like, you were testifying the other day about the Vermont.gov RFP and all the vendors and all that. So would you incorporate something like AI in an RFP to stipulate that the next iteration of Vermont.gov would utilize AI, or is that not appropriate?
I believe we did include that under the auxiliary services. We don't see it as core yet, but we want to start moving in that direction. And that is a conversation we're having with every vendor we interview is, what's your posture on AI? What capabilities do you have? Can you align with our code of ethics and our way of doing it?
Yeah, that seems to be the most common pathway which AI is entering into the enterprise. It's not, you know, going out and getting a whole new AI product. It's the embedded AI in the products that we've been using forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had to work, you know, within our procurement processes and our requirements gathering processes to suss those out and say, okay, we want this, but, you know, we want to be careful that you're not providing it without, you know, human oversight and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think examples that come up a lot, like a lot of the even these cameras, right? A lot of them now have AI in them. And that's great. It helps it zoom in on the right person who's talking and things like that. But it also means that the contracts for those things need to have terms that say you can't use the state data to go train your AI model further.
Right.
You can't take state data and send it to somebody else or share it with anybody else. Like, we have to plug in more terms because there's AI risk associated with these AI powered devices.
Yeah, a great example is, you know, we're all using the Microsoft 365 suite, and they're very actively moving the Copilot, their version of AI, into it. And as we've been relicensing, we've been addressing the terms in the license that don't comply with our AI direction and all the data use and all of that.
My other question is, can you explain in layman terms why AI hallucinates?
There's a variety of reasons. I think the easiest one to understand is um, AI is, I tell my staff to treat it like a very eager intern. It wants to impress you. It wants to show you that it's smart and it knows what it's talking about. And so it will come up with things and very happily tell you things confidently that are actually not so, because it saw it in a hypothetical somewhere, or it's just getting confused based on the context of what you've given it. It can take like things that you say and come back to you with like interpreting those things as facts rather than questions.
Yeah, it'll sometimes take data points and extrapolate the relationship between those data, and therein can be the source of hallucination, right? They may be valid data points, but for very different reasons.
So I guess one example, because we tried can we put a chatbot on our websites like right when ChatGPT first came out? I was really excited. So this is going to be great. And I built one around ARPA funding. So all that COVID money we received, and fed it all of the information we had publicly available, and then asked it if I want to put a new roof on my school with ARPA money, who do I contact? And so it gave me back an answer that had some of the ESSER, the education ARPA money information in it, some natural resources information about runoff, because it assumed a roof would have runoff. And then gave me contact information for somebody over at Natural Resources and said, that's the person to call if you want to put a new roof on your school. And I was,
Yeah.
And then that was when I was like, well, I guess we're not doing AI this way right now.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Context is really hard. And grab snippets from lots of places and try to come up with a coherent answer, and it will look good.
Yeah.
It always looks high quality, but you can't use what it looks like as a proxy to like the actual quality of the ideas. Yeah. I don't know if that was layman's terms.
It was.
Helpful.
In layman's terms, it might be AI splaining.
Yeah.
Rep Campbell?
Yeah, but it does. But what you just mentioned about asking a question about where do I go for this service, that sounds like that's the immediate application for AI. I'm thinking about the integrated eligibility and enrollment thing that we've been working on for the last, I don't know, decade or 15 years or something amazing. That would really make that a possible thing. I'm also thinking about permits for building, housing, or whatever. I mean, having a way to direct people to where they need to go would be fantastic, because obviously all of the various things that state government does and provides are, incredibly confusing to most people.
One of the things that we've been talking about with with other states is people spend a lot more time figuring out how to interact with state government than the actual like interactions. And on the IT side, historically, we spend a lot of time making sure that our forms are easy to fill out and beautiful, or maybe not quite beautiful, but like at least adequate. But people might spend 3 or 4 times as much time finding the form and figuring out what they need before they actually like go fill out the form. And then it goes into a black hole somewhere, and eventually they get an answer. And one of the items that we have on our AI strategic plan is thinking about service, like how we provide services to Vermonters, all the way from them recognizing that they need something through service delivery, and using AI to improve that throughout that whole life cycle. We're trying to avoid optimizing just our back end processes, or just our like the form intake process, and really focus on how can we make sure that Vermonters can interact with us in a kind of a fluent way, or like just be confident in their interaction with us, from realizing that they need something all the way through it being delivered to them.
Yeah, get that fixed, will you?
Yeah, I'll be right on this.
4 times approved.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Not
Yeah.
fixed.
Do we have any other questions? Rep Campbell, Rep Putner?
What keeps you up at night relative to AI in Vermont?
So Josiah and I we're a good pairing in the sense that he likes the policy side of things. So he probably stays awake thinking about the policy size. I'm more of the what if we could do this person. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities that we don't yet discuss because, and it's important. I'm not saying we've neglected them, but the AI problem set comes with let's deal with the risk first. And I think there's opportunities out there on the how we could guide AI to assist the state that maybe we need to have more conversations as well. Not in any way ignoring, ethical use and guidelines to help us get there. But, I fear that while we're ahead of the game for most states in terms of recognizing the risk and developing policy, I think Vermont has an opportunity to be ahead of the game on the other side too, like smart agriculture, things like that for the state. I don't have a specific idea in mind, but just throwing out areas that I know that, we try to help our business community develop in these areas that we can help. So
I think a lot about deepfakes right now.
he's the risk guy.
So yeah, being the risk guy. And I remember having a conversation with my pastor about deepfakes, and he was like, wait, so somebody could make a video of me doing something with one of our congregants and like no one would tell it was fake. Yeah, it's a thing that could that's something that could happen. And so how do we operate in that world? How do we make sure that we have protections for folks who are impacted by that? So I've been working with other states. New Jersey has some really good draft legislation on this. And one of the things that, because I'm the risk guy, I've been talking with our council about maybe putting some language forward for next year. So if you have any deep fake stuff that you ever want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about that. I'd like, but that's the biggest one for me right now.
So okay. I have to buy lunch now.
We did just high level. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, those are relatively mild, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who catastrophize and say, hey, if someone's going to give AI instructions to make paper clips and not tell it not to use human bodies as raw material for the paper clips, and it's going to eat us all up and turn us into paper clips. Mm-hmm. And you aren't touching anything anywhere near those. AI is going to cause buildings to blow up or any of that stuff.
The reason for that is I think that sometimes that catastrophizing distracts us from the real things that are right here. And there are real bad things that are happening already right now that we can do something about. Some of those farther out ones maybe aren't as likely, and certainly aren't things that we can take a lot of action at this level meaningfully right now. And so that's why the ones I'm focused on are for those.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.